Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Joel Goodin with Driven to Doctorate. Today, hosting Dr. Amy White of Walden University. How are you, Amy?
I'm great, Joel. Thanks for asking me.
Do you mind being called Amy?
I do not a bit.
Unless it's your student.
My students.
Right.
You know why? And you know why? Because that is like the greatest joy to me, to be able, the day that they get accepted, to write them a congratulatory email and sign it Amy, because now we are peers. And that is the most fun to me.
Well, I flip it. I'm like, I say, dear doctor, or I say, Dr. so-and-so, and then I sign my name, Joel.
That's exactly it.
I'm like, now you know how it feels, and they've got it takes a while to get used to that. And I just keep trying to push that. You're a doctor now. Let me show you,
Yeah.
So cool. I was going to ask you the story of Dr. White, just any details you want to share, but where are you from? Sort of a little bit about your story.
Okay. I'm from a little bit of everywhere. I was actually born in Orlando, Florida. I've lived in multiple states all over. I spent a lot of time in Dayton, Ohio, and then I spent all of my teenage years and college years in Texas. Okay. So I started with music really early. Like, I've been a musician since I was 5. It was also at age 5 that I have this, I can see it in my head, this preacher visited our church, and they introduced him as Dr. So-and-so. And I said, I thought he was a preacher.
You can't be both.
You can't be both. And someone explained to me, no, he's a doctor of philosophy. That means he has the most college you can get, and he knows lots of stuff. And it was, I remember it. I was like, I'm going to get a doctor. Like, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm going to have a PhD at age 5. And I sort of haunted my mother about it forever, because she didn't know much about it. I mean, she's wicked smart in her own right, but she's a software person. So she's like, I don't know anything about that. So she asked questions and found out. And I knew I was going to have a PhD. That's what I was always going to do. It went back and forth between, it was going to be in music, or it was going to be in law, or, what it was going to be in, shifted around a little. But that I always wanted that. I always loved learning stuff, anything.
Right.
So I started my career teaching middle school. I actually started as an assistant percussion instructor at Hebling Christian High School while I was still in still in college. And when I graduated and did my student teaching, I decided that 8th graders in the oboe were not my jam. So I also had a degree in social studies. So I taught middle school social studies, and I was the percussion instructor at the same school. So I would come in early to do percussion lessons. I'd do percussion lessons during lunch and during my off period, and then I'd do them after school. So I could still be involved with the band. I'd help take them to competitions, but I taught social studies in the classroom, helped the marching band percussion kids, with their competitions. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. And maybe several years into my career, I noticed that I was constantly having new teachers in my room. Like, they were always in my room raiding my files. I was like, fine, whatever. If you want it, new teachers, come get it. And I finally realized, if I'm going to help new teachers learn all this stuff, I'm going to get paid for that. So I decided to get a PhD in curriculum instruction and assessment. And I started that 23 days after my wedding.
Wow.
Because we decided, let's just go for it. If we're going to, let's just start poor and we won't know the difference. So I left my teaching job, which grieved me greatly, but I wanted to go full time. I wanted the full experience. I wanted to be a graduate assistant. I wanted to be a graduate teaching assistant. I was a research assistant for one of the deans. I just wanted to do it all, because I'm crazy and I like to know lots of stuff. So I quit my job. I remained the percussion instructor there. So I drove back and forth doing percussion after school for them. and I started my doctoral degree. And I was there maybe a semester, and the department chair came into our doctoral cohort and said, look, we have had a huge enrollment we didn't expect. I've got to have somebody who can teach undergraduate teachers during the day. And everybody there was a full-time educator but me. Like, I was doing the full college thing. So I was like, oh, me.
Right.
So 1999, I started teaching my very first college classes while I was in my doctoral program, and I have been doing it ever since.
Wow.
And I just love it. I just love it. I majored in curriculum instruction assessment. I had a double minor because we were required to minor outside of our college. So I had a double minor in political science and educational research because, again, I'm crazy.
Well, was it a fine line between crazy and genius?
I'm not sure I've ever crossed that line, but I've got the crazy part down. You can ask my students and children.
You're going to err on the crazy side.
Err on the crazy.
Humble. It's more humble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've loved it. I've loved every minute. I mean, every career has ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so glad getting a doctorate was the best thing I ever did, because it really showed me. And most of the people in my cohort didn't go into higher education. They wanted to be school district administrators, and I benefited from their experiences too. I got to learn so much from the things they said in class and from their experiences. And they were just amazing people, but they were just on a different path than I was. And I've just loved it. You know, you have ups and downs in your careers and things that you love and things you don't love as much. But I've never had a moment's doubt that I'm doing the right thing, because I just love it. And I think the ability to help teachers be their best in their classroom gives me the ability. My passion is K-12 students. Like, I want equity and I want justice for K-12 students. I want them to have a teacher in their room that wants to be there, that belongs there, and that knows what they're doing. So being able to teach teachers and help them find their passion for students, that's the best job ever.
I'm not sure if I mentioned this, and I could obviously do this in private conversation, but I want to shout out to the soon-to-be Dr. Jeffrey Hinton, who I want to connect to you.
Yeah.
I mean, he's defending in 10 days, I think. And, you know, maybe I shouldn't say it beforehand, but he will be successful. And his dissertation has really been insightful in terms of like culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. So I think I want to connect the two of you.
I love that. I read his prospectus like way back when. I was one of the approvers on his prospectus. I remember that name and the CRP framework.
I think, you know, especially in 2020, as we are all sort of, well, not everybody, but a lot of people are sort of stepping back and taking another look at racial equity and other types of equity in America. You know, his study is very opportunistic, and you know, it's very sort of, it's got a great potential for addressing some of that racial inequity. And I know that's something you've researched, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
You want to share about that?
Well, I mean, I believe in teachers. I believe that you don't spend all that money to get a degree to make absolutely no money on accident. Right. Like none of my students, when I taught undergrads, none of them were surprised. It's not that they graduated and said, what? We're not going to make any money. Like, they know. They spend money to make no money because they want to, because they care. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that they know everything they need to know. You don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so education, and particularly research, thoughtful research with representative populations, can really make such a huge difference. Like, we don't even know what we don't know. I love, like, Jean Glass is one of my favorite scholars, because, and I always throw this out at my students when I teach, like at ed research class. My favorite quote of his is, in education, we're in the unique position of knowing so much more than we can prove. Like we can't prove stuff, but we know. That's also, I'll talk later about, that's a problem with teachers as researchers too, because you ask them how they know and they're like, because I just know. Okay, but not really.
Right.
Like, so that's something we have to address in the research. But thoughtful representative research has the possibility, the potential to make such a difference, especially when we as researchers and scholars and scholar practitioners put out that research in a method that is accessible to teachers. Like, yeah, you want the peer-reviewed journal. I have those lines on my Vita, and I am super proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm more proud of is distilling that research to the real lives of teachers. Like, if you can make a teacher understand why they ought to care about culturally responsive pedagogy, because they all think they're responsive, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't show up to those classrooms every day with that rainbow full of kids of needs,
right,
and do what they do for no money. They think they know, and they are honestly doing the best they can. But if you can't do better if you don't know better. And that's where I think research and practitioners have this place where they need to come together, and we often don't. We're often talking in two different directions, and we're not talking to each other. So I want the thing I ask my doctoral students every defense is, how are you going to make a difference with this research? Like, what are you going to do with it? That's lovely. Welcome to the academy, Dr. Whoever. But how is your work going to make any difference at all besides just being in one more library's ProQuest annotations? Like, right? I don't know that anyone ever read my research, but I made my mom download it because I needed at least a download
right,
for my impact report. But what are you going to do with it? How are you going to disseminate your research? How are you going to make this make a difference? And I ask that at every single defense, because that's it. Research done for nothing other than research sake is, useless in education. In medicine, not necessarily, because it adds to the body of research. We draw conclusions. We look for causes by a preponderance of evidence and things. But in education, if you can't distill it down to the people in the building, it's useless.
mm-hmm. Right. And I'd say the same thing. I teach education with you, and then at another university, North Central, I teach psychology. And I think it's the same thing there. I would say even medicine, if it doesn't impact lives, then why do it? You're just torturing yourself if nothing
You're just
else.
torturing. I like that. You're just torturing yourself. That's genius.
I don't know.
But there's so much that we really do need to dig into, and I am the first one to admit, like, I might have had a single mother that we grew up in poverty, but I still had more privileges than a lot of people.
Right.
Growing up with a single mom in poverty, I still had privileges that lots of people don't have. And I'm the first one to admit that. So we have to help educators take a deep look and say, that's great. You're a great teacher. Love what you're doing. What can you do better? What can you understand more? How could you understand your students even more so that you could reach them even better?
Mm-hmm. I think, 2020 is, I got to be careful with how to talk about 2020, but it's a time of reflection, right? It's a time that we can, if we want, choose to reflect and grow. And you're going to talk about growth, I think, later. But we can choose to reflect and grow. And if we can get our educators to reflect and grow and maybe notice areas of inequity in their classrooms,
that's right,
ways that they can lift up those that are underprivileged. I really like to focus, instead of on privilege, in terms of who has it. Often I say, well, those are the people that have it the way everyone should have it. So let's focus on the underprivileged. Let's identify that. That's the need. And how can we lift those people up?
Absolutely.
They have obviously equality, equal privilege, but
We need to get to a place where it's not a privilege anymore, right? Where it's just how it is.
Exactly. So I'm glad that you've worked on that, and I think you've done some research on sort of equity in the classroom.
Yeah, equity in the classroom, multicultural education, the how schools can win pro-civil rights outcomes in courts. Like I spent a lot of my master's and early doctoral work trying to use predictive analysis to find how schools can get better pro-civil rights outcomes so that they can gain what they need for an equitable education.
Well, you mentioned the possibility of I guess it was a JD that you were considering.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So I was wondering, was that part of the tie-in there for that?
Oh yeah, I wanted a JD real bad. In fact, my minor professor who oversaw my minor in political science, she was a JD PhD. So she had a PhD in political science and a JD in law. And I was like, oh,
I want that. Yeah.
So after I finished my PhD, she said, well, I clerked for a lot of justices around here. I can get you into whatever law school you want to go to. And I was like, that is the best thing ever. And I told my brand new husband who had lived through this. I mean, I started in August of 1998 and I graduated in October of 2001. Mm-hmm. So I hurried. So It was a lot because I double minored as well. And I taught and ran professional development schools for the university the whole time. So he was like, that's awesome. You want to go to law school? Awesome. Could you maybe get a paycheck first? And also, it's fine as long as you don't ever write another dissertation. Like you can go to law school, but you may not write another dissertation. Like we would not survive it. I was like, okay, never mind. He's a good egg though. I mean, I couldn't have made it without him, but he was very clear on the prohibition against ever writing another dissertation for a JD. So, but I haven't given up the idea completely. I just haven't told him that.
Well, wait long enough, he might be more open.
He might be ready to be rid of me for a while. After quarantine, he might be ready for me to,
Yeah, now may be the right time to bring that back up. So you're at Walden now.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I have stuck like glued to Walden is their social change mission. I take that real serious, and I'm proud that they do too. Yeah.
I love that. So tell me what you're doing there, and we'll sort of seg into what influence you have in terms of faculty, and then what you can offer students as well.
So I now am the coordinator for our master's degree specializations in curriculum instruction and assessment, reading and literacy, and special education. Great. So I oversee all of those, and I have 40 faculty that work with me on my team, and I serve on 28 doctoral committees. So I like to stay busy with that. I worked full-time in the doctoral programs for a long time, and then we shuffled around, and I came over to administrate this part of the master's degree. And some of those people also serve on doctoral committees. But I still keep my doctoral work because it's kind of who I am. Right. Is being able to, that's the best thing I've ever done. It took me a long time to qualify as doctoral faculty, where I could chair and methodologist and URR, university reviewer. And I love all of those roles. I love teaching. Like I teach in the master's program some too. We have great classes. I'm teaching one on the trauma-informed educator that starts in a couple weeks that I'm super thrilled about. Because I think that's a missed opportunity for a lot of programs to help teachers understand the trauma that our kids come with to class, whether it's, quarantine or, domestic issues or floods or hurricanes. There's all kinds of baggage that our little guys and gals bring into the classroom. And if we can make those classrooms trauma informed, then we just remove more barriers from those kids, no matter who they are and where they come from. We can be about removing barriers. So I'm excited about that class. But to be honest, like my soul is a doctoral mentor. Like that is what I love to do. So I still keep those committees.
I'm 3 years into doing that, and I think it may be what I'm meant to do. We'll see what the future holds, but I just love it. I love it. That's why I'm spending my free time talking to you about it. Yeah, I love it. I want to be the best I can possibly be at it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I get these free advice sessions via interview. So,
which I think is great. I think that's a great idea.
Well, it's also, to let students see behind the curtain a little bit,
Yeah.
and realize we're human. If they forget that, then they're going to have a problem.
Yeah, they are.
And we're going to make little mistakes or big mistakes even, and forget to realize that their study is not feasible, or we may not realize their study's out of alignment, or whatever.
Right.
And then the methodologist comes in and says,
"Wait a minute,
this won't work." This is a student, their fault. No, I don't do that. I try not to. So tell me more about your role. What do you have to share about sort of academia, dissertating, and how you disseminate what you know about it?
Well, I like to I'm kind of a marshmallow at the beginning of a doctoral journey. I like to toughen that up pretty quick afterwards, but I like them to really understand who I am and where I come from and what I believe that process is. Mm-hmm. So I talk to them a lot about their mindset. Like you're going to need to understand that you are likely the cleverest person in your circle. Like I like to be the smartest person in the room. Doesn't happen very often, but I really like it when I'm the smartest person in the room. We all do, right? So you have been killing it in your doctoral classes, and they come and they're exceptionally accomplished. They're great teachers. They're great students often. And then they hit the dissertation wall. And so I start right away with, it's great that you're good with your academic work, but that is not a predictor in any way, shape, or form of how you will be as a dissertation writer. Like that's a second language. And I describe it as that. I'm like, you're now ESL. Welcome to your student's experience, because you speak academic, you do not speak scholar. And you won't speak scholar until you've learned to write in that way. And you won't learn to write in that way until you're almost finished writing that way. It's the nature of the beast. It's just what it is. And so you should come off that, but I've gotten an A in every class. You should just leave that right on behind you. But B, you should realize that if you weren't capable, you wouldn't have gotten this far. You're capable. Right. You speak academic. You just don't speak scholarly. So I need you to relax a little and trust the process. And trust me. Trust that my whole function here is to get you through that. Like I don't get paid to flunk students. Like that doesn't help. I get paid to shepherd students through this process. But at the end of the day, we have to have a study that we can all be proud that our names are on, because my name will be on that too forever. Right. So we all have to be proud of the work. So sort of let go. You're going to grow in this process. And so that's when I talk to them about growth mindset. Like you have to be in it to win it. You have to understand that you're going to fall down. There are going to be things you don't know. There are going to be things that you're going to get some pretty strong feedback on. Like your first draft, you're going to get some smiley faces and hearts. But after that, we don't have time for that. Like how much time do you really want to dedicate to reading happy, fluffy? In academic papers, you want the hamburger, the compliment, the negative feedback, and then the compliment again. Like I really don't have time for that. And neither do you, because you want to just know, like, don't you just want to know what's wrong so you can fix it? And they come to that realization, oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. I don't need happy faces and hearts. I need to know how to fix it so I can graduate and call myself doctor, because I deserve that for myself. And I tell them, you do. You deserve that. But you got to listen. You got to trust me. It's my job, and I'm here for you. It's the only reason I'm here. Like, I already have a doctorate. I already wrote my dissertation. Been there, done that. I am only here for you. Right. And once they realize that, then it makes it easier to give them the feedback they need to move forward. But that's a hard thing, right? It's hard. It's hard for any of us to have someone mark up our work. Like, even when you're a member of the academy and you send work off to a journal and they send it back and they're like, that's not very good. And it just rips me apart. I mean, even to this day, I'm like, you're kidding me. Like, I'm a decent writer. Like, I've been at this a long time. What do you mean? Needs revision. And then you got to step back and go, okay, that's what this process is for, about making it better. Mm-hmm. So I try to have, with my staff and faculty, I call that fluffy. Like, we start fluffy. Like, how can we all, have a fluffy experience and talk to them and get to know them a little personally? I post pictures of me in my online classrooms. I try to make welcome videos so they can hear, like, my kids don't think I'm funny anymore, but I'm pretty funny. Like, I'm good fun. So I try to have video announcements. I try to get them to hear my voice so that when they're reading at 2:00 in the morning, something that's not super flattering about their work, they hear my voice. They hear me laugh and say, we're going to get through it. Just read it and fix it. Because that's where I want them to go. I want them to always feel like I can grow. No matter what it is, I can do better. And Dr. White is here to help me do that so that I can be proud of this degree and this study. So that's where I start. By the end, it's just like, stop it. I'm not fluffy anymore by the end. Like, all the fluffy's gone. You need to graduate in 4 months or less. Let's just go.
But you've built that rapport that allows that sort of direct messaging, and that sort of, I'm not going to say it nicely anymore, because you know that I can be nice, but right now I don't. You need to hear what's wrong.
That's right.
You've built that space. Some people don't build that space, I think, as chairs. They don't build that rapport and say, hey, all that uncertainty in front of you, I'm going to walk you through that, and I need to earn your trust to do that.
Right. Faculty have to spend the time to build that. But students have to have the mindset to take it. If you have a student that can't have that growth mindset, that no matter what happens, this person is going to help me grow, it's almost over before it starts.
Right. If they don't give you the chance to earn, if they don't give me the chance to earn their trust, then we're just going to go back and forth. I'm going to give feedback. They're going to get defensive and say, well, my last instructor, Dr. Amy White, told me it was good, and we're going to get nowhere that way.
Yep. I also encourage students to ask questions. Like, if you get a draft back in a class, in a dissertation forum, you get a draft back and your first reaction is to quit the program, then you need to stop and you need to schedule a phone call. Like, even in brick and mortars. And I went through that. I was a tenured professor in a brick and mortar before I moved to Walden. Even in a brick and mortar, in the dissertation phase, I don't see students very often. I mean, it's different. They can drive to my office, but they don't usually. So I don't see them very often either. And so I would say to any doctoral student anywhere, if you get a draft or you get feedback that just makes you feel like, I'm done, like, this person's not on my side, I'm a failure, I'm done, stop. Don't do anything for 48 hours. Like, forget that you saw that. Play with your kids, walk your dog, whatever it is you do, just go do that for a while. And then request a phone call or a Zoom or a conference or whatever. If you have the ability to get face-to-face, that's good too. But, get online, get on the phone and say, I'm really upset. I don't think I'm reading this feedback in a way that's healthy for me. Help me understand, right? Like, don't just say, this woman's crazy. Like, she doesn't want me to graduate. faculty, just like your average K-12 teacher, higher education faculty pretty much do this for love. I mean, I got a bunch of fancy degrees and I can support my family, but I'm not tearing it up like Deloitte over the road in my city. I do this for love because I have a passion for helping students, whether they're K-12 or higher ed or doctoral students. Most faculty do, right? That's why they're here. So just like I would tell your average sixth grader, why do you think your teacher gets out of bed and does this every day? I would tell your average doctoral student, pause. Like we do this because we are passionate about the work as well. So I'm going to assume that you did not mean to make that dangling participle mistake 11 times after I told you not to in the next 16 drafts. I'm going to assume that you're not completely ignoring me when I tell you that is idiomatic. Stop writing that way. I'm going to assume that you're not doing that on purpose just to make me mad. So you should assume that everything I say is intended for your benefit. And if you don't like it, let's talk. I'm not going to completely change who I am as a doctoral chair. But if I know there's some landmines in your life, I can fiddle around with it. I can, add a smiley face after it occasionally. I can tone the way I give you feedback if I know you're going to talk to me. I am who I am, but I want my students to succeed. So as a student, I say, you've got to communicate. I mean, I talk to faculty as an administrator about being fluffy and building rapport and all of that. But I also turn around and I have some town halls and I talk to students about, this is your degree. You chose to come here. You're the one who wants to graduate. We already did. So you need to drive the bus. If there's something you need that you're not getting, ask. The answer might be, that's not reasonable. But the answer might be, sure, let's try it that way. Like you have to drive the bus as a graduate student. You're not in compulsory education anymore. This is not K-12 where we put your parents in jail if you don't go. This is you chose to come here. You chose to pay to be here. So don't run away and don't make it my fault. Talk to me. What do you need that you're not getting? How can I help? I might not be able to accommodate every need you had, but I promise I'm going to listen and I'm going to try to moderate what I give you to help you. So sometimes faculty don't listen, but sometimes students don't talk.
Right.
So it's got to be a two-way street.
It is. I think, I don't know the percentage, but so much success in the doctorate. I'm getting a little feedback. Sorry. I kept hearing myself. I was so much success, I think, in the doctorate, and I haven't figured out the percent yet, and it wouldn't be valid anyway, but is relational. If you've got to, I tell my students sometimes, you've almost got to figure out how to manage your committee. And there's something to be said to being strategic with your committee, to putting, if you have a choice, put the right committee together.
Yes.
If you don't have a choice, try to get to know them, understand how they work, understand how to make them happy. Mm-hmm. Because yes, it should all be sort of an equal document and you meet this threshold of scholarly pursuit, but somebody's got to interpret that scholarly pursuit and you need to make sure you understand how they interpret it, right? Absolutely.
That is stellar advice for a starting point. I have like my personal example of that is we got to pick our major professor, right, and our minor professor and our method. We got to pick all that. And I picked a major professor that was the chair of my specialization. She was a lovely woman. I felt like she knew everything about curriculum, not so much about methodology. So I picked the methodologist that knew I did meta-analysis for my dissertation. So I picked the methodologist that literally wrote the program for meta-analysis. And nobody told me they didn't like each other. Like to a spectacular degree, they did not like each other. But I needed both of them.
Right.
And I put my foot in it because I had written something about the program that I was going to use for the meta-analysis. And I took it to the methodologist and he said, oh no, do it this way, do it this way. And I emailed her and said, Dr. S has an idea. I'm going to send you a draft with his notes on it. What do you think? Would this be a good direction for me? And her response was, if you want him to be your chair, you should ask him. And I thought I would die. Like, I went running down. My office wasn't too far from hers. I went running down there. I'm like, I don't understand, but whatever it is, I'm sorry. Like, whatever. And she was like, don't you talk to anybody before you talk to me. I'm the chair of this committee. And I was like, you got it. Like, you tell her. She was very specific, and I didn't know that I should have asked. And after that, I would just say, can I send this to Dr. S? I'm struggling with the methodology. And she always said, yep, do it. But she did not want me to do it without her knowing it. And that was her firm rule. It was easy for me to abide by, but I almost made her mad and stuck my foot in it. Right. So find out those things. I try to tell all my students, here's how I'm your chair. That is like a manager role. I'm your dissertation manager. So here's how I manage that process. I don't like you to email this person or that person without copying me, because I don't want to be a step behind. And here's how I see this process. And I just tell them, because I learned that lesson the hard way by making my chair real mad. Now she's a lovely, she sends me Christmas cards now. I mean, she's a lovely woman, but I violated the rules without knowing it, which I would have never done on purpose. I'm a rule follower. So you have to know your committee. You have to ask questions before. Some people see that as taking initiative, but doctoral committees often see that as overstepping. So just ask. You may get one of those chairs that says, I don't care. Like, I'm the methodologist on a lot of committees, and sometimes they email me their drafts. I'm like, oh, no. Like, you need to go through your chair. I'm not talking about this draft until we check with your chair. And she's like, oh, my chair doesn't care. Like, he said, just send it to Dr. White when you want to. And that's fine. As long as we all know how this committee should function. Everybody's different. And that's fine. But ask questions. Find out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can tell. That was 2000. That was 20 years ago that I got my proposal approved. I was getting my proposal approved. And I still vividly remember I was in my office and I just started bawling. So, ask questions, be proactive, but don't get ahead of your committee.
Yeah. There's some naivete, right? And sort of like, oh, they're my methodologists. I'll go ask them a methods question.
Yeah.
And you don't realize sort of the unspoken, unwritten rules of, in the respect that, if I want a student and I'm fine with sending a student's paper to you, I'll tell the student, hey, CC me on that so that Dr. White knows that I'm good with it. Or if I'm not good with it, I'll know to respond, what are you doing, student?
Yeah. Check with me first. Well, and because the methodologist has a very specific role, and we don't want to overwhelm the methodologist either.
Right.
Let's you and I get on the same page before we drag somebody in to give an opinion on something that may not be fully formed yet. Let's wait. We'll get better advice if we make sure we're at the right stage.
Right. Students sometimes get ahead of themselves, and that's very frustrating for me. It's like, you weren't supposed to submit that yet. We are not anywhere close to being ready. Yeah,
absolutely. But as faculty, though, I think we can do a lot around, which I learned. I did not do this in the beginning, but now I have that. I'm the manager. Conversation with them, and I put it in terms they can understand and say, here's how I see my management role, and here's how I'd like us to proceed. They're all fine with it. Like, none of my students are like, I can't believe you. Because I learned I need to tell them, because I'm going to be upset if they don't do it the way that I feel it works best to get them to a good place on time. So I just need to tell them that. Right. As much as students need to speak up, faculty need to speak up too. Here's how I want it done, and here's why. I want you to trust me. This is going to work. It's going to work better this way.
Right. That's part of like professors knowing themselves enough to know what's going to press their buttons and make them happy.
We all have buttons.
Here's how to make me happy. Here's how to make me angry.
Exactly. I mean, fair point. Here's what it is. I've warned you ahead of time.
So I think you said something about things you say to faculty members.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talk to a lot of faculty members about this whole process and how they can build that rapport, but also how they can structure things for students. Like you sometimes have to over communicate with students. Especially if you serve on a lot of committees, you kind of get into a groove and you think everybody already understands. And you have to have some specific overt conversations. You also have to be able to negotiate with the other committee members, right? You can't just ignore, like I was so grateful to my major professor that even though I found out quickly, they did not get on. So long as I followed her structure, she was welcoming to him. She made sure that we were all on the same page. And it wasn't until, I graduated that I found out like they were never even in the room at the same time before me, because nobody had ever asked them to be on a committee together before. Most of my CIA colleagues weren't doing like big meta-analyses.
Right.
So it just hadn't happened before. But they both, behind the scenes, like she was mad at me. I don't know if she said anything to him. If she did, I know he said something back because I know him. I love him, but he's a hothead. But they worked that out. I never saw that. I never heard that. She made super clear to me what she wanted from me, but she never said a bad word about him. And that's super important for faculty. Like when I get put on a committee, at Walden, often we don't have any choices about who's on the committee simply because there's so many students and not all of the mentors teach classes. They don't even know most of the people available for mentoring. So they don't usually have any choices. And I certainly don't have any choices about who's on the committee with me most of the time. And I mostly get along with people, but some people just set my nerves on edge. But I know that X person or Y person isn't fluffy and isn't going to pull any punches.
Right.
So I just talk to the student about it and say, look, you've got a stellar methodologist. He, she is absolutely going to steer us right. But it is not going to be fluffy. Like they don't say nice things and there's going to be a lot. So I need you to I'm going to send it to them and they're going to send it back to me. You are not going to communicate with them. I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to review the feedback before it gets to you because they just they don't pull any punches. It's going to be good for you. You are going to graduate faster because of it, but you're going to want me to see it before you do. And they're like, okay. And I do. And so I can soften some of that feedback, or I can put in a comment and say, he's totally right. Here's what that means for you, or gosh, I totally missed that. I should have seen it.
For sure.
She's right. And that sort of conversational management of tough feedback from someone I know is kind of prickly about feedback helps the student, but never, ever gives the student the impression that we are not, as a faculty, on the same side. Like, that's the thing. I want students to see behind the curtain some, but I don't want them to ever see the disputes on their committee. If we're going to, act like I tell my children, if you're going to act ugly at home, please, like where nobody can see it. And we're just going to work that out because we're adults, we're faculty. That's what we do. But don't ever put a student in the middle, because I have managed faculty that just say, well, she won't she won't change. So we're just going to have to ask for a new methodologist. That's not good. That's not good for the student. Like as a doctoral faculty member, like you have to wear a lot of hats. It is not for everybody, because you have to manage how the student learns and how they receive and read feedback. You have to manage frequently many other voices of methodologists. And we haven't even talked about at Walden. We have that third layer of university research reviewer, which is a good thing because it's sort of that cold third read. It finds all the things that we've overlooked because we've seen it 4,000 times. So it's a great role, but it's often a shock to students. So as a doctoral committee member, you really have to wear a lot of hats. But the most important thing is we can disagree. Like you and I, Joel, could disagree, but our students should never know that.
Right.
Like all our students should ever hear is, and I've had to tell students, I'm not going to send you this feedback right now because I have some questions about it and I'm going to work it out with your methodologist before I send this back to you. So you just don't need to worry about it. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this person's crazy. Like this is nuts. But we're going to work that out because we're professionals. And as faculty, you have to be able to bend a little too.
Right. Many of our students, they're grown adults, they've had full careers, but it's still our responsibility to teach professionalism and to show it.
Yeah.
And maybe they already know it, and maybe we're not really teaching them, but it's still our responsibility to act professionally, to not say, well, your methodologist is just a horrible person, or like,
and pray they're not talking about me.
No, but yeah, you're right. But it's like two parents talking to the kid about the other parent, it's
Very much so.
unhealthy.
Very much so.
I was thinking also about what you said about the maybe second committee member or the methodologist that doesn't pull punches. You prefer that than the overly fluffy. Overly fluffy is okay and it's nice and it feels good. But is your dissertation going to get better because of that? Less likely. Yeah. Because you're not being critiqued. You're not being pushed to elevate your study to being better. And and the other thing they don't realize is we don't have to do all the things this other person is saying.
That's right.
We can negotiate with them and say, and within any feedback, we can say, well, what is true here? What is important? What is useful? And then some of the other, we can say, I don't agree.
Right.
And so if we teach that, this is that growth mindset I think you mentioned. If we teach that, then we can realize the benefit of having that overly scrupulous, methodologist or whatever on the committee. That's better than not getting feedback.
Not getting feedback. But, we have to grow too, like fair game, no matter, I've been teaching college students since 1999. But every time I work with a new faculty member or I teach a new course or I get feedback from a committee member I've never worked with before, I learned something. I'm frequently like, oh, I'm totally ripping off that comment. Like that is the best way to put that. Why didn't I ever think about that? And we have to be willing to say, that's great. Can I borrow that? We have to be willing to grow. Otherwise, we get entrenched and research, particularly in education, changes. It evolves. Populations change. Methodologies shift in and out of fashion and what schools will and won't allow. We really have to adapt. And it keeps it from being boring, right? I can always learn. When I get a committee member, it's almost better when we disagree because it makes me stop and think, why do I do it that way? Like, why?
Right.
Where did I get that notion from? And sometimes I come to the conclusion, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. I'm good. But sometimes I think, you know what, Amy, I really need to rethink that. Like, I'm going to get this person on the phone and say, help me understand your feedback. Help me understand. That's not how I see it at all. But your other comments are spot on. So I need to understand where you're coming from. And I learned something from that. And it makes me better. When I first started at Walden, we had a much less stringent process. The prospectus was just a form and you just kind of said, yeah, that's fine, and sent it to somebody. And now we have all these great resources and these great structures and like amazing things for our students. But in those early days, every time I opened feedback, I thought, oh, that's really good. Like I read this paper 4 times, I never noticed that the student left out this or that they were phrasing that wrong. And not everybody looks at things that way. But if you're going to be part of the academy, if you're going to mentor students, you have to grow as well. I want my students to grow, but I think that means I am also obligated to grow. I am obligated to examine my practice and question myself. And in doing so, then it doesn't get stale. It doesn't get old. It gives me new excitement for working with more students. Oh, I learned next time I have a student, I'm totally going to do that. It's great.
It goes back to that humanity. For me, that's what I'm thinking of, is just having students remember we're human, and if we don't remember we're human, and that we're gonna mess up, we're gonna need to keep learning, then we're missing a lot of opportunity to get better. And
Absolutely.
I've kept you a long time. So was there anything that you haven't gotten to talk about that you sort of had on your list?
Let me see.
If not, I mean, we can always have you back for a different talk.
Just my number one piece of advice is that everyone should be transparent, right? I want what I want as a chair. And so does the methodologist, unless I'm the methodologist, so does the second member, so does the student. Like, you should be transparent. Tell me what you want, tell me what you need. I can't always accommodate, but I'm sure going to try, right? So everybody, but this is a relationship, this committee, and you're going to be in that relationship a long time. Hopefully not as long as some students, bless them, but it's a long-term relationship, and you've got to invest in being transparent. You have got to learn their language, and you also have to accept that you don't know everything, because you're the one person in the room with no doctorate.
Right.
So we're on your side. We are absolutely here for you as a student. You have to recognize the expertise we have fought so hard to earn, and let us help you. Right. And likewise, we have to learn who you are and how we can best guide you. Everybody needs to be transparent.
That's good. You have so much experience in this. And I do hope to have you back sometime.
I'd love it. I love talking to you, Joel.
We'll see. Me too. We don't get to do it often enough, so maybe this will schedule it in.
Sounds great.
So is there any way you'd like, you said you had a website, I think.
Yeah, don't judge me by my website, because I don't spend a lot of time teching it up, but
Okay.
dramywhite.weebly.com, no period, just dramywhite, all one word, .weebly.com. There's a form where you can reach out. Like, it's not super high tech, but if you want advice or you need somebody to bounce ideas off of, I do some consulting, but I like to encourage students. I'm a big encourager. Like, you can do this. So, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been Driven to Doctorate with guest Dr. Amy White. Thank you all.